Thank you again so much for joining us here at Spotlight. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, it's lovely to be here. So thank you so much for the kind invite. I'm Clare Knox and I'm the founder of See Her Thrive. And we are a company committed to making sure women's health is recognised, valued, supported in every workplace.
Amazing work that you're doing. And as I read online, you founded See Her Thrive out of your own experience with specifically PMDD. What was the kind of moment when you said this has to change?
Yeah, going back quite a few years ago now, I was actually a school teacher before I started this whole journey, and living with PMDD and trying to work in a very structured, high pressure job was incredibly difficult, as I'm sure a lot of people listening with this who have PMDD will completely understand. And that was pre-COVID. It was before working from home and flexible work, which has changed things quite a lot. But at the time, I was experiencing the monthly onslaught of PMDD symptoms and didn't have the confidence to talk about it at work, even though I was going through a really difficult time. I just did that thing that a lot of us do, put on a mask, put on a brave face, showed up at work, did the best job that I could do. And then I would get home and just be exhausted from doing that. And it got to a point where I was frantically looking for help with, how do I speak to my manager about this? How do I approach a conversation about PMDD and the difficulties I'm having? And I couldn't find anything. There was just nothing out there in the world about how to navigate PMDD at work. And I thought maybe if I look at endometriosis or periods, menstrual health, there'll be some stuff on that. And again, there was just nothing. And I thought, this is absolutely ridiculous. There are millions of people who must be facing similar challenges and really struggling with this, like I am. Why is nobody talking about this? And it was the kind of thing that once I realized that, I couldn't unsee it, and I couldn't not do anything about it. And that was really the beginning of leaving teaching and retraining in organizational psychology. And I'm very fortunate that I was able to do that, and did research on people's experiences of PMDD in the workplace and how it affected their professional lives, their careers, talked to many women as part of that. And See Her Thrive was born along the way. It was an idea I had, and I thought, I need to do something. I really need to get into workplaces, educate employers and managers and teams about PMDD and menstrual health and the unique things that we can experience as females in the workforce. And that was it.
Wow, amazing. Really great how far you've come with it. Yeah, leading from that, you said you did research into how menstrual disorders like PMDD manifest in the workplace. What are some common patterns you've seen emerging from that, and what are the misconceptions that have come from that?
That's a great question, and there's a lot. I'm sure we could speak for hours about this. So linking to what I said about masking, a lot of people that I spoke to, and there's other research that supports this, go to work when they're not well enough to be at work and push through symptoms, push through those PMDD days that are really hard, really difficult. Being at work is probably the last thing that lots of us wanted to do in those moments. And that masking and that presenteeism was often the catalyst for burnout and longer periods of absence. And it makes sense, doesn't it? When you push through and you're going against what your body needs and what it's telling you to do, at some point, the wheels come off. And so that was one thing. The fear around being open was definitely another theme. And people talked a lot about being worried they'd be seen as incompetent and incapable. And there were insecurities around their job and being passed over for promotions and advancement and things like that, which I completely understand. And I think I definitely had some of those fears and worries as well. And then there were some really shocking, at this stage, I think I've seen and heard it all, but some really heartbreaking stories of people who had been open about PMDD with their manager and had been met with just a complete lack of support. And actually, I would take it a step further and say discrimination in quite a few cases, and had been treated very unfairly and were definitely disadvantaged at work. And so that was a real eye-opener for me, because at that time, I had no idea that people were experiencing such unfair treatment. It's hard enough to live with PMDD, let alone be in a work environment where you don't get the support you need. And more than that, you're actually treated appallingly. So they were just some of the kind of headlines, if you like, that came out of that research.
Wow, yeah, that's very insightful. What would you advise someone then who had faced this kind of discrimination or appalling treatment at work?
Yeah, so I think it's so exhausting, the condition, that when things happen, you get to a point and you just don't have the energy to fight. You just don't have the energy left to advocate for yourself and to question things and to challenge things. And so I'm saying this coming from a place of, I really recognize how hard it is. But what I would say is, if you are on the receiving end of unfair treatment or any comments and things that are not supportive, then I would first of all speak to someone in the people team. They should be the first port of call, and hopefully they will be able to guide and offer support. And then there are often unions, organisations who you can pick up the phone, drop them an email and have a confidential conversation. In the UK, we've got places like ACAS who are really good to talk to and get advice from. But I don't think we should let it go, because if we let it continue, then other people are going to be on the receiving end and the whole cycle will perpetuate. But it is, at the same time, it's really difficult to challenge it.
Yeah, I completely can imagine that. It's not easy to deal with any kind of discrimination, really, let alone something that is so debilitating. Also, on the flip side, right, for someone who is struggling with PMDD but has not found the courage, or due to other circumstances has not been able to be open about it at work, but they want to, how would you advise them to start that conversation?
It can be a really difficult conversation. It can feel uncomfortable. It can be nerve-wracking, and it's often something we don't necessarily want to jump into for all the reasons we talked about previously, but it can open up the door to support. And I think that's the important thing. It's thinking about what will happen 6 months down the line if you don't have this conversation. We know that with PMDD, it can affect performance at work. It can affect things like needing to take time off. So sickness absence might crop up for people. And so if it is starting to have an impact on your work performance, then it's definitely better to be proactive and to have a conversation about it, rather than get into any kind of disciplinary situation. Or some companies have this trigger-based absence management system, and then you end up having an awful meeting with HR and you're forced into making a disclosure. So while you can control it, I think it's always better, and it does give you an element of control over the situation. The next thing I would do is prepare for it. Don't just drop it on someone, drop it on your manager and say, can I have a chat? I just want to talk to you about PMDD. It is going to take some preparation. And what I would do is a couple of things. I would send an email ahead of any conversation to a manager and say, I'm having some health challenges and it's starting to affect me at work. I would really appreciate if we could have a chat to discuss some adjustments and support. And along with that, you might want to send a link to some information about PMDD just to give them a bit of a heads up. There's so little awareness, it's unlikely that the manager will have heard of it. I might be doing some people a disservice in saying that because some people may be familiar with it. But at least then you've primed that conversation, you've prepared your manager, you've given them that information ahead of time, and then you don't spend the first conversation, because I think it requires multiple conversations, not just one. You don't spend your whole time having to explain what PMDD is and all of the symptoms and what causes it, which is really annoying and it feels very invalidating. Instead, you can focus on talking about, okay, so the way that PMDD or the way this health condition, you don't even have to say PMDD, the way this affects me at work is it makes X, Y, and Z difficult for this number of days every month. And this is what would be helpful. This would make me feel more comfortable. This would help me to manage my health. This would stop me from burning out. This will help me to be able to continue to do my job and be part of the team. And also highlight the fact that you hopefully love what you do. You love being part of the team. You want to contribute and add value. And this is how you can do it. I would also say we have a tendency, and I do think this is a gendered thing, we have a tendency to downplay a lot. And we see this in medical appointments, but also in the workplace, because we don't want to bother people with what we're going through. We don't want to burden them with our problems. And so we downplay how severe it is. And what I would say is make it clear that this is a debilitating condition. It's a serious, severe, and debilitating condition. And use language that's comfortable for you. But some people do talk about the fact it's a mental health condition. It's listed in the DSM-5, and they talk about it from that perspective because it gets across the severity of it. So yeah, that's a few tips. And finally, while we're speaking about managers, something that I hear people say a lot about male managers is, I'm not going to talk to him because he won't understand. He won't get it. There's no point. He won't listen. He won't get it. I'm just not going to say anything. And what I would say to that is, we also can be guilty of putting barriers up and our own stereotypes of what we think a male manager, how he's going to respond, without giving him the opportunity. And actually, a lot of male managers I've worked with and delivered training to are incredibly supportive. They're so supportive and they're desperate to know what they can do to help. So don't shut people out before you've given them the opportunity to meet you with support.
Yeah, and you never know, their partner might be struggling with the same thing, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, they might have a partner, they might have a daughter, a sibling. Yeah, it could open the door for really lovely conversations and connections and really strengthen that relationship you've got. That thing of you never know what people are going through behind the scenes, and it works both ways.
Oh, definitely. What a good answer. Thank you so much. I think it'll be very helpful for a lot of people. In that vein, what would a truly inclusive workplace look like for someone who is struggling with PMDD? Not just the policies and the rules, but also cultural-wise, everyday things. And also leading on from that, is there an example of a company that, you've seen do it right with supporting hormonal and menstrual health?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Such a good question. So what would an inclusive workplace look like? To me, it's about being able to be at work and without the masking, without the contorting yourself to fit into systems and structures and norms that, if you've got a chronic health condition, are really difficult. It's really hard to fit into that. And so there's something around having the security and the psychological safety to be able to say, this is the way that I need to work because my body's different, my brain's different, and that's okay. I have a different productivity pattern to most people, but I'm still a really valuable, high-performing member of the team. It's just the way I work looks a little bit different. And I think that's part of it. And then having the autonomy to self-manage as well, to not treat people like children and micromanage them and want to know what they're doing 24/7 and dictate when things should be done, how things should be done. As long as the work and the results are there and people are delivering what they're meant to do, let's let them work however they want, whenever they want, within operational parameters. But having the autonomy to manage work and health in sync, I think, is really important as well. So they would be the main ones.
Yeah, and also communication, right? Like, I don't think at the moment it's really accepted to go to work and say, look, I'm in my luteal phase right now, so if you could just not piss me off, that would be great. But how amazing would it be if you could just say something that indicate that you just weren't feeling well that day and to just leave you to it?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And we should be able to do that with our immediate team. We should be able to say, look, I need to just be on my own today. I'm going to crack on and get on with this, but I'm not in a good headspace. I'm not having a great day. I'll be okay. I'll come out the other side, but this is what I need to do to get on with things. Yeah, obviously that's harder in some professions than others. But having that, the communication, the openness, and just having that human approach, recognizing that whether it's PMDD, whether someone's on a fertility journey, whether someone's going through grief or relationship difficulties, there are times when we're all struggling. That's the nature of being human. And yet we still have these ideas about work and what's professional and how we need to show up every single day. And we live in this high performance culture, which I totally do. And it's, how do we marry that with being human and all of the stuff we deal with and we go through at the same time?
Yeah, really nice answer. And for the example of a company that has done it, do you still have one of those?
Oh, I'm not going to name drop because that would be, I work with lots of companies and that would be unfair if I named one. There's a couple of things they do and ways that they approach menstrual health, reproductive health, that is a little bit different. The first noticeable thing is there is some kind of sponsorship from the executive team or the leadership team, and it's being driven from the top. And what that looks like is people sending out communications if there are events, people actually opening and doing a welcome if there's training or a webinar. I've delivered talks and training where CEOs have been in the room, and that really does show I'm committed to this. We as a team are committed, and as an organisation, we're taking this seriously. So they have that top-down approach, whereas unfortunately a lot of this work and these initiatives are driven bottom up, often by women with lived experience who are having a difficult time, they are trying to drive these initiatives, gather momentum from the ground up. And that's really difficult. And it makes me sad that's the case. And we do need to see more leadership teams getting behind this and really driving it from the top. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing that the companies that get it right are doing is they don't just have a talk for International Women's Day or a talk for World Menopause Day, but they'll zoom out and they'll actually look at the organization, they'll look at the culture, they'll look at the policies, the processes, the systems, and through the lens of someone who might be living with PMDD, endometriosis, perimenopause, and they will make changes to policies. They will make sure managers have training. They'll make sure that there are resources so people have support. They'll look at their benefits and things like their healthcare provision. So they have this holistic view, and it moves away from the tokenistic, let's do something for International Women's Day, which it drives a lot of us mad. I know people listening will understand that, but we deserve more than that. And workplace well-being, it's about culture change, and to do that it needs this long-term embedded approach.
Yeah, and what I'm also hearing is like we need leaders to also lead by example, so to be open about their own struggles, because I won't believe that women or people who menstruate in senior positions are not struggling with these kinds of disorders themselves. So once they start sharing, they will show it's okay for us to share as well.
So I did a session recently for a team, and I think she's the MD, so very senior in the organisation. She did the welcome and talked about how difficult her menopause experience had been. And people were so appreciative of the vulnerability and the fact that she paved the way, and that tells everyone it's safe to talk about these things. It's okay to talk about these things. And so, we need more of that. We do. And equally, there have been events where senior male colleagues have talked about the fact that they've supported their wives with various different conditions and their daughters, and it's so powerful. And storytelling is a huge part of this, storytelling and vulnerability, and having strength in that. We need to model the behavior we want to see in our organizations, and so that's something that we need more of that good stuff.
Definitely agree. And following on from the whole being able to flexibly structure your work the way that you would like, if you could redesign the standard kind of work week or month, because this is of course a monthly cyclist, through the PMDD lens, what would it look like? Because I've also talked to some people who are struggling with PMDD who then say they tend to overcompensate in the first 2 weeks of the cycle and almost burn themselves out to then be able to take it easy the last 2 weeks. And to me, that makes a lot of sense because of how it goes in terms of your energy. But then isn't there also a huge danger of then overstretching and overextending yourself in the follicular phase?
Absolutely. You've just highlighted something that does come up quite a lot. And it's this superwoman type thing where you feel in the follicular phase with that uptick of estrogen. We talk a lot about progesterone with PMDD and the luteal phase, but what we often miss out is the effect of estrogen. And for a lot of us, we see insane levels of creativity and productivity, and we want to do all of the things, and we commit to lots of things. We say yes, and we take on so much when we're feeling good. And then the luteal phase hits and it's, oh shit, why have I agreed to do that? And I'm swamped and I can't keep up. And that is the cycle that we live through. And PMDD also does this thing where it convinces you every month, once you're through it and you look back and you think, oh, I don't think it was that bad actually. It's like you gaslight yourself, and so you go through the whole thing again. But for me, the way I would, in an ideal world, and this is very applied to how PMDD showed up for me in the symptoms and what I do, I would do a lot of the customer facing outward stuff in the first 2 weeks. Now, ovulation wasn't a great time for me. So that mid-cycle, I often got a migraine, and that hyper creativity would tip over to be almost like anxiety, and I wouldn't sleep properly, and I'd be wired and a bit frenetic, which isn't always helpful. So I might have a bit of a warning over those post-ovulation days, because I would often have a big crash after that, and maybe just take my foot off the accelerator on those days. So my PMDD would get progressively worse the closer I got to my period. I know for some people it's the same level of severity from ovulation all the way through, but mine definitely got progressively worse. So I would start winding down, and in an ideal world, I would have 3 days off before my period. And I say off, it's very interesting. And I used to do this. I would say to myself, right, you're not going to do anything today. You need to rest. You're not going to do anything today. And the minute you take that pressure off, actually, I would find myself tinkering away with things. And I don't know if that was a positive distraction, and I would get a little bit lost in certain things, particularly things like research and just fact finding, and maybe doing bits of reading here and there. Nothing massively difficult or creative, but I would definitely do nothing customer facing in those, I would say, 3 days before my period. And I have done it before, and I've been in awful situations where I haven't performed at my best. And in fact, I've underperformed because I've tried to push through PMDD. And we also need to be mindful of that when we want to show ourselves at our best. And what does that look like in terms of our job and what we do? And when are those days in our cycle? What do they look like for each of us?
Okay, so if I understand correctly, what you're saying is basically to try to put those tasks that are low pressure, that you can just do easily, maybe research, maybe some admin things, and all those kinds of things that you know you can handle. Yeah. You're very secure in yourself during that period of time. That's actually a really good point.
And thinking about something that can be really helpful is, what is a potential trigger for you? So as an example, for me, opening emails, the unknown of what's going to be in an email, it could be something ridiculous, but on a PMDD day, things just land differently, they hit differently. And so you want to remove the unknowns, the unpredictabilities, and any people, environments that add stress or make things more difficult. You want to try and avoid those on your toughest days, which it's ideal world stuff. It's not always possible, but that helps to manage things.
Really good insight indeed. I want to touch on something slightly different now. Some people with PMDD say it makes them feel like they're failing at being a woman. In your experience, how does that belief show up in professional settings, and how can we change that?
Over time, PMDD can just engulf you, and it can become your identity. And I'm speaking from personal experience here. In the depths of PMDD, I really lost myself in it and completely lost sight of what I'm good at, what I enjoy, what I bring to different situations, both in my personal and professional life. And all I could see was the negativity of PMDD and all of the impairment, if you like, and all of the difficulties associated with that. And I think that's one of the cruel things about the disorder, is it has that ability to just take over completely, and you become the condition. And I see that in the workplace, because people lose confidence in themselves. They lose confidence in themselves, in everything that makes them brilliant, and they can't see past the difficulties they're having with PMDD. And it's about trying to remember, you are so much more than PMDD. Yes, that might affect you at certain points during the month, and it's really hard, and I get that. But also, don't lose sight of everything that makes you brilliant, because you are way more than the PMDD, and there's so much more to you. And yeah, it can stop people putting themselves forward for promotions and opportunities. And I see people gradually become more withdrawn as well, and it does have that effect. So the more we can lean into remembering and recalling and really focusing on our strengths and what we're good at and what makes us brilliant, and asking for feedback. What did I do well? What went well about this? Because we don't often seek that positive reinforcement, can really help to bring back into focus all of us and not just the PMDD.
Wow, that's a really lovely perspective. Thanks for the reminder. Nice. I know we've already touched on this a little bit, but as a last question, what would be your boldest hope for the future of work when it comes to menstrual and hormonal health, not just PMDD, because obviously you work with so many more things surrounding that? And what needs to happen to get us there?
I saw a LinkedIn post, and I can't remember the name of the person who posted it or their company, so I'm really sorry, I don't have that information. But it was a male CEO of a startup, so albeit potentially a small agile team, but he said, I'm letting everyone in my team work when they want, how they want, in whatever way works for them. And one of the reasons he cited was to manage menstrual health. And he was aware of that. And he said, enabling people to work with their body, not against it, it's going to be better for everyone. And for me, I read that and I just thought, this is what we need. That's it. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. And it goes back to what we talked about with autonomy, giving people autonomy to really manage their health and prioritize their health and navigate work alongside that. So for me, that's the dream. Probably more difficult in reality, definitely for some workplaces and teams and professions. But I hope that we get to that point.
Wow, that's beautiful. How encouraging that that person shared that way. That is really nice. Yeah. And I do believe we're making steps. Like, from all the people I spoke to, that is like the one common thread, is everyone is saying we're making so much progress, we're moving forward. So that's also really giving me lots of hope.
Yes, things are moving forward. Definitely. I've been in this space for 10 years, I think. Things have definitely changed. We've had this huge menopause movement, which has opened up the menstrual health conversation. We just need to keep going. And especially in the face of everything that's happening politically and the difficulties we're seeing with ED&I and things like that, we need to just keep going and keep talking about it. And yeah, we'll get there. We will.
All right. Thank you so much for your insights. That was my last question. Is there anything else you would like to add?
I don't think so, no. Just it's always lovely to connect with people. So if anybody wants to connect, I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram. And yeah, it's always nice to chat to people.
All right. I'll make sure to link everything you just mentioned everywhere I share this. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for the conversation.
Thank you.
Good point. Well done.